Welcome to the Whole Health Podcast,
where a functional nutritionist and a biological dentist investigate the interconnectedness of your health.
Let's get started. Welcome back to the Whole Health Podcast, and today I'm really excited to invite Megan Mosley as our guest. I'm going to say a few words about you before we dive in, but I'm really excited to get into this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Megan Mosley is the founder of Bodywise Consulting and Coaching, where she believes that true well-being begins with being well. I love that. In a world that glorifies constant doing, Megan empowers her clients to step into the transformative power of beingness to reconnect with their authentic selves and thrive. With over 35 years of experience as a physical therapist, extensive training in interpersonal neurobiology, somatic psychology, we're going to get into what that is, including IFS, Hakomi, and RCS, and certifications in the Resiliency Toolkit, trauma release exercise, embodiment coaching, Pilates, and yoga, Megan brings a unique body-mind integrative approach to healing and personal growth. Through her innovative framework, The Art and Science of Being Me, Megan guides clients to understand themselves and their personal experience through the interconnectedness realms of beingness, body, emotion, mental, and essence, empowering them to access their innate wisdom and embody authentic alignment with their core truth. She offers retreats, online courses, and one-on-one coaching to help clients rewire their nervous systems, rewrite their stories, and cultivate a life of alignment, clarity, and connection. Her work supports individuals healing from stress, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and autoimmune challenges, empowering them to move from patterns of survival into states of resilience, calm, and vitality. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Well, Megan, you and I have shared some clients. We have a chance to connect with each other and learn about each other's practices. And I think for a long time, I thought you were a physical therapist and you worked with people's physical bodies. And I was like, yeah, go see Megan.
Yeah.
She'll totally help you. And it wasn't until recently, within the last year, I really started to pay attention to the depth of your work. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about how your career has shapeshifted to where you are today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about this, kind of moving toward this conversation, and I can remember the moment actually that it was my 40th birthday. I was in France. I had just summited Mount Ventoux. That was kind of what I wanted to do to celebrate my birthday, and I was with my husband at the time, and it hit me like, I cannot do this another minute. Like that I was in this place of recognizing, I didn't have the words for it at the time, but that I was literally surviving my life. And I just had to be like figure out like, who am I? Why did I make choices that I felt like kind of compromised myself? Why have I like worked so hard at everything throughout my life, but don't feel like I'm actually like living the rewards of that, you know? And so went through that process and in that was really pursuing some help around that. And I just feel like I've had so many universal gifts about how this landed. And I got to work with a woman who does somatic psychology, which is body-centered psychology, meaning looking at how do we hold our story in our system and kind of the unfolding of that versus traditional talk therapy. And so started working with her. It was so powerful and so quick. And I just started kind of intuitively integrating that in some of what I was doing. And within a year, I thought, I'm going to continue working with this, but I'm going to study with this group. So I started studying with a group called META, Mindful Experiential Therapeutic Approaches, and they were here in Portland. And sadly, not anymore, but I studied with them for years around, that's kind of where I learned all of the developmental psychology and interpersonal neurobiology and that work and applying it in these frameworks of how are you with people, versus, kind of really kind of cultivating that, what I call now this state of beingness. And that led me further into a few years later of, again, kind of tripped into an opportunity to meet and work with David Berceli. And he is the founder of trauma release exercise. And that has become a big piece of what I do. And that is this process where all mammals do this thing where they shake, right? Except humans have a cognitive brain. So we dampen that. Shaking's pathologized. It feels weak. So I help people induce that reflex. And I equate it to letting the water out of the stream, and you see where the boulders lie. And it will, similar to like something like ayahuasca or psilocybin, it gets to under the conscious current, and it's very, very powerful. So it's by far not the first thing I do, but just kind of understanding and having the psychology background, it led me into looking at how do we provide more foundational framework for that. So I started working with a woman, Nkemna Defo, who does nervous system resiliency, and it's called the Resiliency Toolkit. And so that's kind of the beginning of what I do, are these body-based somatic practices that help us shift our nervous system state and what I call the gears, back down to gear 1. And so he has such good
Speaking
ideas.
of gears.
Yes, he's shifting gears. Yeah. And then on to doing some embodiment coaching. And so have really put my physical therapy background into all of this and looking at thinking this whole time I'm thinking about bottom of the foot to top of the head, thinking I'm doing like a holistic practice. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like the power of the body and the nervous system and like this healing that we have inside to out. And that is really what it's about. And the body holding the nervous system, like 80% of it, more versus just the mind. It's such an incredible, quick and powerful and like way to make things really stick and change. Right? And
Wow.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm hearing more and more in the world of functional medicine around stress response, trauma response. A book came out a while back, The Body Keeps the Score. People come in and they talk to me about that all the time. Did you know my body is holding, tension, trauma, et cetera? And I also still don't really completely understand this. And I wonder, when somebody comes to you and they know nothing, how do you break this down? What is this? How would you know if you need this type of work?
Yeah, I think that, I'll start with kind of looking at like trauma is such a catchword right now.
It is.
Right? And then we talk about capital T trauma and little t trauma. And the capital T trauma is like something like a big event that happens. But the little traumas are really kind of what most people have, what a lot of us have, right? And it's anything that we don't have the capacity with in the moment to for our nervous system to really cope with. And I describe our nervous system as a through line, kind of like this golden through line of who we are. And I hold that as beings, we are all sharing in this place of what we are supposed to be, is in this gear 1, in this place of beingness, in a place of feeling safe, and share in what I call the universal imperatives of safety, love, connection, truth, integrity, wholeness, rightness, being, belonging, worthiness, freedom, empowerment, harmony. And you guys are like nodding your heads. Like nobody's like, yeah, no, thank you. I'm not really interested in wholeness. Yeah. Right. So these are just like the is. So when we talk about like who would benefit or who has trauma, we all do at some level. And so kind of offering this framework of helping people see like in this, what I call it's like, what's it like to be me? And so Be Me is an acronym for body, emotion, mental, and essence, realms of our beingness. And how we are at any moment in any of those realms is dependent on the gear of our nervous system. So you can look at this framework and be like, and recognize it's like, oh my gosh, this is what I feel like. A lot of us ride in gear 2, where there's, tension in the body, and I can't keep my thoughts straight, or I'm confused and I feel like emotionally distant. So it's ways to look at like, oh my gosh, like, this is an experience that I'm having related to things that have happened in my life, but it's not who I am. Because I can reference the preference of being in gear 1, and everybody can. It's like, oh, I want to live most of my life up here. And I tell people, I'm like, that's who you are, right? Even if it's like, oh, I wish I felt more belonging, or I wish I felt safe. That kind of, that wishing, the longing, that's who we are. And to root back into that and help people find that spark and to come into what I call authentic alignment with their core truth, that's where the trauma healing happens. So I think that's how we recognize it, and that's how we can kind of start, right, with looking at how do we shift toward that as individual beings and as a society.
It's interesting 'cause Kelly and I talk about mindset a lot with our patients and what their belief systems are and how that affects their ability to heal or be well. One of the questions that comes up a lot in my practice, and I would say it happens more with women, not because it's not happening under the surface for men, but arguably they show me a little less vulnerability. That's what I would say. They show me a little less, not everybody. But I will say to women, when is the last time you felt safe? And it is auto cry.
Auto cry.
It's an auto cry, right? It's like, we don't talk about safety, but that's a nervous system state.
It is absolutely the most fundamental, as I list those imperatives, safety is the root of all of them, right? You can't feel like you truly belong if you aren't safe. You don't feel like you have integrity if you're not safe, right? You don't feel whole, right? And I think that safety is, you hear a lot about like Peter Levine's work and like, oh, well, you're not running from a tiger, so you are safe, right? And you can tell yourself that, right? Or it's one thing to say, oh, just tell yourself you're safe, or just let it go, right? It's not that easy, right? It's wired in. But the way that I explain it is that it's safety in your authenticity, safety in being yourself. So when we're talking about these kind of cumulative and long-term traumas, and this has even if you grew up in a home where people really tried to be good to you, like one of my mentors, he says, I love him, he says, the problem with most people is they were raised in a family, right? And so intention does not necessarily mean impact, right? And the kind of a core wounding for a lot of people is that in order to feel safe when you're young and you're not in charge, right, is that you will choose, no matter what the situation is, belonging over authenticity. So that place of like feeling safe being me, or even knowing who I am, right? And feel like I don't have to like meet everybody else's needs or be quiet or be cute or be whatever are the implicit belief systems that get laid in. And so I think when we come to a place of, where kind of our clients are now saying like, oh my gosh, like that, just even that idea of feeling safe that rings so true to people, it's definitely an auto cry. Right? Yeah. We are crying out for it as a society.
Certainly.
Yeah.
There's something else. I can't help but think about like, okay, so you're a physical therapist? But obviously, I mean, I love the story about you're in France and you have this awareness, epiphany, what have you. I'm so curious, what was going on that you had that aha?
It was just a matter of, I didn't feel like I could really show up or be myself. Like it just, like my ex he's not a bad guy. It was not like something that felt like it drew me out into myself, and that I felt like I was really like able to really thrive in my life. And I wasn't feeling met. It was like it was fine, right? It was benign, and I wanted more than benign.
Yeah.
So. And I just felt like the more I looked at it, the more like why do I settle for things? Why do I get upset about certain things? Why do I, so I just think it was just a matter of being like, okay, I'm 40 and I'm reflecting on myself and I'm like, I don't want to be here when I'm 50. I'd way rather be alone and more like clear and solid in who I am in my own beingness than be like, oh yeah, I have a relationship. It's going okay,
Going through the motions.
Yeah, going through the motions. Yeah.
So, boy, of all the things we could, like, how do we get this kind of information into the hands of, like, the Instagrammers these days? Because I would imagine, like, I think about when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and what social pressures, like, how do you learn to be me? You've got your social influences and things, and that might have looked a lot more analog, of course.
Yeah.
You go to school, go to your soccer team practice or those kinds of things.
Right.
Today, life is lived on a different level. I mean, I have two daughters, and I would think that the influence they have via, particularly probably social media, impact how you're trying to positively aid in people's understanding of who am I as me, not as a reflection of what I'm seeing tells me I'm popular or accepted or what have you. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I don't have children, and so I'm not dealing with that on a day-to-day basis. But I also see like I'm not a big social media person, but I do see that there's also a lot of stuff out there around authenticity, around being yourself, around standing up for what feels right, around anti-racism, so I feel like there's that influence as well, that I think that's got thousands and thousands and millions of likes. So I feel like all of these things that we're challenged with right now are pushing us to a tipping point. And as this kind of information moves forward, like you're saying, the body keeps the score. That book has been number 1 on the New York Times bestseller for forever and ever and ever, because it resonates with people. It's like, oh, this makes so much sense, right? So I love information about how to get this out there, right? It's like, this is one way, right? But to look at, I think once people start hearing it and feeling empowered in the sense that oh, wait a minute, it's worth knowing who I am. And I think the other thing too is that I witness in the world a different time. Like I'm 57. When I grew up, it was just kind of like I was raised Midwest, Catholic, conservative, and it's like, these are the rules and this is what you do, and there is no wiggle room, right? Yeah. And now, as I see, especially living on the West Coast and people that are in my circle, it's like they're raising their children to actually, like, well, how do you feel about that? Like, who are you? Like, they're helping them individuate and be their own person. And I think that the more we're learning about the importance of attachment, attunement, autonomy, nervous system development, I think that my hope for kind of people that are growing up in the world now is that they're not turning 40 and really needing to rewrite their lives as much.
I do love the 40s, though. There is something that comes with it.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm thinking about this. I remember learning about nervous system reset when my kids were younger, actually. And I'm an animal person, so I actually get to observe animals do this. My horses do this. So there's a threat or there's a stress or something to an animal, right? They get an increase in their stress hormones, or they have a scared response in their body, right? They're activated. They need to do something because there's a threat, right? The threat goes away, and they do this shake thing, right? And you see it.
Yeah.
They
Oh,
shake. Sometimes they'll drop to the ground, shake, drop to the ground, do this whole rollabout thing, right? And then they're like, oh, I'm safe again.
They get up like it never happened.
Right? Like nothing ever happened. Okay. So I'm aware that happens in nature, and I'm aware we also don't do that as humans. So I'm curious, although wouldn't it be great? I'm curious. So when we're thinking about how we develop as humans, as our nervous system is developing, we don't let these things go. We hold them, almost like I think of it as building upon belief systems that keep our body in a certain state of our nervous system.
Yes.
Can you educate us a little bit on how that's happening, what we might experience as human beings as we move through our life and these patterns are set?
So the nervous system is developed primarily in the first 0 to 7 years, and there are critical needs, right? Beyond food and water, there's so much around that we know about attachment now, like how often and frequency of eye contact, and babies being allowed to make eye contact and then look away and then come back, not like have the mother be like, okay, look at me, look. So it's like, kind of attuning to needs. So attachment, attunement, autonomy, obviously safety. And so these needs come up at different times. And so when those needs are met, and perfectly, like none of us really had, we would be more in this year 1 experience. But it's like our innate sense that things aren't safe. And what I would say in kind of my work is that it's kind of out of alignment with one of those imperatives. So like as an infant, you don't really know, these imperative names, but you can sense if something's off, right? And so that sense kind of leads us into what these belief systems are, like, oh, well, if I'm quiet, then things will be safe. Or if I do everything just exactly right, then it'll be okay. And we don't name these things, but there's stories that we tell ourselves that we then kind of carry into our lives, and that we tend to then repeat and try to work out in relationship, right? So
then in your body, versus being in a state of safety, where you're going to have a very different biochemical state, when your nervous system has developed to be in a state of fight or flight, or we call it gear 2, is that
gear 2 is like,
gear 2?
Yeah, so
you're elevated.
Yeah.
You're kind of just elevated all the time. what might you see happen in your health and your well-being? Are there symptoms? What is happening?
Right. So you're looking at your nervous system being in a higher gear. So you're looking at it covers everything. So your digestion, your sleep, your immunity, your inflammatory responses, everything. Your nervous system is in charge of all of that. So, and then in the body, just observing, you would see like more tension. And we talk about and originally my background in physical therapy, it's like, oh well, I have bad posture. Well, maybe, but like, what else are you holding? What happened to you? Is the weight of the world on your shoulders? I work with people in what I call cultivating authentic alignment, and there's an embodiment of that. And as we look at this and, talk about an auto cry, like I'll stand there with people and I'll just kind of coach them through. I'm like, so take a look at yourself here in the mirror. And then I'll be like, so notice, like you're like literally ahead of yourself. And you're like pouring your energy forward. And I can just read the belief systems from how their body is being held, right? And so then as we shift that story into like coming home into yourself, to creating stability by how you set your pelvis, to connecting to your core, to feeling like you've got your own back, to, opening your heart, to speaking your truth, so that's an auto cry for people, like, oh my God. And to start to use the body to change that story is super, super powerful. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I got to go shift over here for a second because as we're talking about, and these are new terms to me, so thank you. Yeah. Gear 1, Gear 2. Yeah. And you're just talking about like Gear 2 kind of being this elevated energetic state, if I understand.
Right. So Gear 2, the way that I say is like Gear 1 is a parasympathetic state. Mm-hmm. Gear 2 is your first kind of survival response. So fight, flight, fawn typically. And then Gear 3 is freeze, fold. So Gear 1 is, they call it rest, digest, tend, befriend. I like everything to match in the F's. So I say in the body, Gear 1 is function. Emotionally, Gear 1 is fun. In the mental, it is flow. And in essence, it's a sense of freedom to be yourself. Mm. So those gears, we're gearing down toward 1. And what I will say about that too is that just to know that in Gear 3, where we get into this place of like just overwhelm, and it's the place of like hopelessness and shame, and your body just feels like, you could feel like your vision blurs, you can get numb, like it's survival, like it's last ditch effort. That in moving from that place of feeling really kind of retreated into yourself, it's a ladder. So as we're like looking toward going to Gear 1, it brings you through Gear 2. So sometimes people can get stuck in that place of feeling like, oh, I did this and now I feel more anxious. Like if you've ever heard of people doing breath work and it actually made me more anxious, right? So I think normalizing that it's like anxiety is more aliveness, and going in that direction, you'll go through toward Gear 1. So I think that's a really important thing to understand.
Right? So awesome. My brain thinks about like atomic structure, of course, because I'm a geek, and like our point of stability is to be at that point, that one point, where it's like if you put too much energy into something, it goes into an elevated state, but its desire is to be, back at state 1. I think it's interesting how, we're talking about like human being size energetics that reflect what at our, root core, on an atomic level is quite similar. Mm-hmm. And
yeah,
how much awareness or attention are we giving that balanced state when our lives, at least based on my experience, we've got a lot of influence coming at us that would lead us to not necessarily take the time to think about, like, what's it mean to be me? And this is beautifully done, by the way.
Thank you.
I like this. You can see we're having more conversations in the future.
Yeah.
This is great. Tangent, but thank you.
Well, I just would speak to that for a second around kind of like looking at how much influence there is. And there's so much, I think, societal value around like going, doing, thriving, striving, going all the time. And there's so much input when we're looking at, social media and everything else all of the time, that I think that there's so much science around this that micro practices are really the key. That it's not about sitting on a Zen meditation cushion for hours at a time, but if we can create these little baby, I call them Be Me breaks, and the kind of the 3 like ABCs of the Be Me break is this authentic alignment, the body language of that, the story you're telling yourself, and then really the important part is the C. It's the check-in. It's the sense of compassion and connection with yourself, and maybe contacting. And it's what I call, it's the plant. So as you have this like 2 or 3 minute micro practice, you're noticing, kind of going through your mind like I call it like a flyover of like, in my body, more settled, in my emotion, lighter, brighter, more expansive, mentally, a little slower, essence. I kind of like myself better. I'm a little more connected. And so then it's like, oh, I made that change. So it's like it's like this little sticky bubble that sticks in you, right? And over time, in practicing that, it accumulates just like stress does. And we start to notice, it's like, oh, beingness is not someplace that I visit 4 or 5 times a day. It's actually who I am. So we start to notice within a couple of weeks, typically in people that I'm working with, it's like their whole system is shifting. In fact, somebody in class last night was saying like, it's so interesting. Like now I'm actually like, I'm more in this gear 1. So I'm noticing when I go to gear 2 versus like operating here all the time. Right. So I think that like when you're talking about how do we create change, it's like little baby bits. And it's not about doing anything. It's about I'm choosing to be with myself, right? There's a lot of intention behind that. And because you can look at a million things, right? And be like, oh, do this box breath, do this, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter if you aren't really cultivating a sense of value and care and connection with yourself. So
such good information, especially for those like us who tend to be like,
What?
Humans doing rather than humans being, is great food for thought.
It's interesting too, I think, because as you said, Megan, it is celebrated in our culture, especially to produce and to be stressed out and to be overwhelmed. That you get gold stars for that.
Extra credit.
We moved to Italy when my kids were in 4th and 6th grade, and it was like painful, to be honest with you, because it is not celebrated to do that there. And I kept looking for people that understood me, and they were never going to. So then I just had to become like them, which is that there was a balance between productivity and rest and connection. And then I moved back to the States, and that was equally painful, having to upregulate expectations here, right?
Yeah.
But it becomes our norm. And so moving away from that norm can feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
What is the first step for somebody that doesn't even know what being with themselves means?
Right.
What is that? How would they recognize it?
I think that it's kind of what you're saying, even like that kind of quick drop into tears. It's like, that's a recognition there. It's like, oh, I do want to feel safe. Or like when I have somebody like kind of shift into this alignment, kind of recognize that piece. So, and it's really subtle little practices that you're starting to, and it's not comfortable initially. Like I had somebody the other day that I offered, I said, so, just notice what it might be like to put your hands on yourself. And they said, I can't, it's too much. It's too much. Like, so, and, kind of working with like, how do we come into a place of valuing ourselves, and what was the trauma that created that not feeling safe with contact, even of your own self, right? So yeah, I think that how do you start that, right? I think with these little baby practices, little baby senses of connection. And when people hear about this kind of work, or like even these things on Instagram about people just standing for themselves and like, this is who I am, we're drawn to that. Those are like everyday people hero stories, right?
So I want to ask you a bigger question about this.
Yeah.
Why is this important for... Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah.
Why is this important for our health and well-being?
Well, just on an individual basis, when we're looking at cultivating our well-being, like, and our health, by shifting our nervous system, we're looking at, how much money do we spend on health, right? And all these things that we're kind of reactively trying to fix, versus how do we, if we cultivate this state of like nervous system being at this, where it's supposed to be, where we're healthy, where we have homeostasis, and where we have normal digestion, we're getting good sleep, we feel calm, so we look at it in all these realms. When we're safe in ourselves, then we can be connected to others, which is like our lifeblood, right? And so I think that on an individual sense of well-being, how we show up that way that's a big game changer just on pure health. The next thing is that as we do that, because as beings we resonate, simply by showing up, like it's so fun for me to have clients be like, you're not going to believe it. Like I went to the coffee shop, people like they're like, I want some of that, right? and the sense of like how people interact with you, because we're magnetic. Because when we feel safe in ourselves, people are drawn to us. And then that gives them this kind of drop of safety. And I think of it as like ripple effects. And like, how can we as individual beings be our own resource, our own source, literally be like what I call plugged in? And then we're kind of like, then we're radiating the light, right? Then we're giving that out to other people. And as individuals, in this big, crazy world, how can we create impact? I think that's how we do it, is by being part of the wave, being part of the shift, being a source for other people. And that is, I think, the more people that do that, the big picture kind of humanity changes. Because when you're looking at our division and our politics in war and all this stuff, it's like people are acting out of survival mode.
Yeah.
You look at this election, like, Trump won because people are acting out of a survival mode, not out of a state of being and understanding and trusting and supporting others in a we. It's a very me mentality.
We don't feel safe as a culture,
Right,
and
we
we
do
see
not.
that show up in health all the time. And health is scary, and dispelling information is hard. What do you feel is most misunderstood about this type of work?
That's an interesting question. I don't feel a lot of misunderstanding. I feel a lot of magnetism toward it. Like you're talking about the Bessel van der Kolk's book, right? The Body Keeps the Score. People are like, hear this and they're kind of drawn to it. And there is becoming more and more science around embodiment and the power of how do you use body-based practices to address nervous system dysregulation versus talk therapy, right? And so there's just a lot more science around it. So I don't really feel like there's a lot to dispel as much as there's a lot of information to put out there, right? There's a lot of, the access is an issue, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What does it look like when someone works with you? What is that process like?
It's, I feel like it's such a gift for me. So when people, I work in packages with people, when I work one-on-one, I also do some consulting for businesses, kind of bringing this kind of culture in to create more collaboration and compassion and all of that. But mostly I work individual, one-to-one. And so it's a 3, 6, or 12-month session package. And we meet for an hour a week, and then it's a partnership. So we also kind of share each other's numbers and we check in throughout. But I start with the Be Me framework, kind of an understanding of themselves. And that's often a really huge aha moment for people around, oh my God, like it gives people hope. Like, oh, I can shift. And then I look at their alignment and kind of what they're carrying. And given my background in physical therapy, like as I'm working with people, I'm also like, okay, like we have back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain. Like there's some level of, could be physical injury that happened, but there's also like what level of holding, how you're holding yourself and moving in your world is creating these biomechanical issues at the same time. So there's that aspect of, that's kind of the component of my work that I call breaking barriers. And that's like heart and hip opening. And it's core connection, where we're looking at how do you stay connected to your core and how do you have your own back. So really looking at, we're all so forward. You don't see people that feel stressed out being like, whoa, that is like, stressful. It's like, no, they're like, we pull in. So it's like this fascial plane that we're all locked into. So having this opening and unwinding in a physical way, and the metaphors of creating flexibility in your body creates flexibility in your life. We want balance, we want strength, we want connection, we want alignment, so like these different aspects of kind of that physical part. And then some of the thrive versus survive practices to create this kind of sense of safety within self. And once we have that as a platform, I start doing the tremor work with people, the trauma release exercise. So I set up a really lovely little nest on the ground, and I help people positionally start to induce this tremor. And as it moves through, it does bring up like buried memories. I mean, it might be you've done like a lot of therapy and you're like, I know all these stories, but they're still living in your system. So you still find yourself reacting to things. It's like, I know that that's not how I want to be, but I keep doing it, right? And so it shows up in a way that you're like, and from a place of safety, you can witness, that's how I held that. And it's not who I am. And it literally kind of shakes it out of your belief system. And I also work, as this is coming up, I mean, I use the frameworks of internal family systems. And if you're not familiar with that, it's like really looking at kind of the idea of this through line of our life. And when we have any trauma along the way, part of us gets like stuck or fractured. And so you think about, as you're getting anxious about something, or as you get reactive to something, it's like, that's my 6-year-old. That's what's happening there. So I have people kind of work in this way of like, I call it becoming the superhero of your own life, where you get to like be like, I get it now, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to help this part of me remember that. And it's game changer for people and how that works. So that's kind of it. It's not like session 1 we do this, session 2. Once we're into it, it's very fluid in kind of what feels like serves. I also do, when I'm in person, I do hands-on work with people, and so I love the in-person work. I do have clients as far as New Jersey that it's very powerful, even there. But that's why I really dig being with people. So
there's nothing that replaces that.
Yeah, and then I also have an online course.
Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't get into the trauma piece, but it's 12 modules and 60 lessons of all of these pieces that help you understand yourself and have all of these tools and create resiliency. And then I do in-person classes at the studio. It's right now my first 8-week, and it's been so beautiful that I'll announce in the next couple of weeks when the next one will be.
That's exciting.
And I'm doing some retreats. I've got one next week at the Headlands on the Pacific Coast, and then one at Juniper Preserve in Bend in March. So
a lot of ways for people
to
access this information, which is what's so important, is making making it available to people where they are and how they're able to get to it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up,
I
always like to ask, as we are the Whole Health Podcast, if you were to give something, to offer something to our listeners, what whole health means to you, what would you share?
I think wholeness is really all of these aspects, all of these realms of our beingness, right? And really looking at ourselves in this way of the body, emotion, mental, and essence, and how do I have an understanding for myself and compassion for myself and support myself and value myself in all of these ways, to be able to feel like I'm like being the best me that I can be and showing up in the world in a way. And that feels whole to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for shining your light. You had shared your age earlier, and I thought to myself, I meet new people every week in my practice, and I think, man, I meet 45-year-olds that just don't have this kind of light. And so I'm just encouraging and inspiring to see what you're doing, and it's so positive. I love it. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you, Megan.
Thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Whole Health Podcast.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, please follow us on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can find out more about us at thewholehealthpodcast.com.
You can find me on my website, blodgettdentalcare.com.
And you can find me at bioloungepdx.com, or learn more about my organic soluble fiber supplement, Fluorosophy, at thinkfluorosophy.com.
We look forward to seeing you next time.